Yeah, thank you. Welcome to those of you here in the room at the offices of the Humane Society of the United States in downtown D.C. We're at 2100 L Street in our fifth floor conference room. And welcome to those of you who are participating in the teleconference portion of this press conference. We have three speakers, myself, Dr. Andrew Rowan, who's our Chief Scientific Officer, and Kathleen Conley, who is the Vice President of Animal Research Issues for the Humane Society of the United States. We also have a video of about 2 minutes in length that we want to show. So today we're here because we're revealing the results of a 3-month-long undercover investigation that one of our investigators conducted at Georgia Regents University, located in Augusta, Georgia. This is a public university, recently changed its name as it was a merger between a couple of other long-existing institutions. This investigation focuses on the use of animals in laboratory experiments, and specifically dogs. Now, this is my dog. Her name is Lily. And she's a beagle and hound mix. And the dogs that you'll see in this investigation look pretty similar. And it was one reason why this investigation really spoke to me, as I imagined my own dog being subjected to experiments like this. She's so trusting and so loyal, and that's one of the reasons that these sorts of animals are used in these experiments, because they are so compliant. There are a few issues at work here. One of the issues relates to the unnecessary nature of these experiments on dogs. A second is how the dogs were procured. They came from what's known as, within our parlance under the Animal Welfare Act, a random source Class B dealer who is selling dogs and cats to research facilities. The third issue is that this laboratory, according to the records that we've been able to obtain, and we made vigorous efforts to obtain even more documentation, but the university seemed to clamp down on things once they knew that we were taking a deep dive into what was going on. That this operation has violations of existing federal law and policy that my colleagues will get into in detail. And I think the broader sort of takeaway message from all of us today is that institutions like Georgia Regents and other institutions throughout the country need to be taking on the issue of alternatives to animal experiments in a very sustained and very rigorous and very urgent way. Animals should not be subjected to these sorts of procedures. They should not be killed for non-essential purposes. Now, the Humane Society of the United States is not an anti-vivisection organization. We follow what we refer to as the 3 R's, refining techniques to minimize pain and distress, or hopefully eliminate pain and distress, to animals in laboratory experiments. Reducing, the second R, means trying to limit the number of animals used in a particular protocol. And then replacing animals in laboratory experiments with non-animal models. That 3 R's approach has been adopted widely by the research community. And if it's going to really be put into practice, then experiments like the one that we are exposing today should be kind of front and center in a 3 R's approach. There are distinctions that should be made between different types of research, and this one falls on one side of the line. During our investigators' time at Georgia Regents University, where dogs, primates, pigs, rabbits, and other mammals are used, it became apparent to us that Georgia Regent was using outdated practices and was not investing in 21st century science and was not really taking the animal welfare issues with the level of serious attention that we would hope. and it wasn't investing in infrastructure to properly address the behavioral and psychological needs of the animals. Georgia Regents acquired dogs from Mr. Kenneth Schroeder, a random source Class B dealer who's been formally charged by the USDA for violations of the Animal Welfare Act. And this investigation, this case by the USDA against Mr. Schroeder is still pending. He's based in Wisconsin, and he's one of only six individuals in the country who are serving as these random source Class B dealers supplying dogs and cats to laboratories. That number is way down from years ago, and that reflects USDA's commitment to deal with this problem, as well as the Humane Society of the U.S. and other organizations. Our investigator witnessed an experiment on Class B procured dogs that involved removing their teeth, conducting dental implant surgery, and then resulting in the killing of the dogs by the laboratory officials and practitioners. So I want to show you, to make this a little bit more real, since I'm talking in broad terms here, some of the images and the video, which is narrated specifically for us by the actress Kim Basinger. She herself is a native of Georgia. We spoke to her about this. We presented this information to her, and she was as shocked as we are by the images, and conducted or participated in this video. So do we have, great, I'm going to play the video.
I'm Kim Basinger, and I'm here to ask for your help on behalf of animals at Georgia Regents University. GRU buys dogs from a Class B dealer who's under federal investigation. Dogs like Shy Guy, along with others who may have been family pets, were all used for unnecessary dental experiments. Their teeth were pulled out and replaced. It's very painful. Just look into their eyes. This is a glimpse of what happens behind closed doors at GRU. These dogs were killed for this little sample of their jawbone. Each year in the United States, 65,000 dogs are used in labs. Let's start by protecting dogs like Shy Guy from the hands of unscrupulous dealers and unnecessary suffering. Please visit us to see how you can help animals at Georgia Regents University.
I want to underscore that there's a history of scandal surrounding these random source Class B dealers. Again, they round up dogs. They may be pets. They may come from animal shelters. They can come from any sort of source before they direct them to laboratories. And it was this crisis surrounding Class B dealers in the 1960s that actually led to the passage of the Federal Animal Welfare Act, which was originally the Laboratory Animal Welfare Act in 1966. So the major federal law that is supposed to govern treatment of animals in laboratories was motivated by the very problem that we're identifying in our investigation. So nearly 50 years later, it remains a problem, much diminished because only 6 of these operators exist, but nonetheless, you can see it's very real for the animals who are involved. So we're calling on USDA today to take action to stop the sale of dogs from random source dealers to research labs. It's too risky, the science isn't sound, and it costs the agency too much money to try to police these random source dealers. There were hundreds of these random source dealers just 2 decades ago, and again, just 6 of them today. The National Academy of Sciences in 2009 said that bee dealers aren't necessary for government-funded research, and the U.S. Government Accountability Office in 2010 found that Class B dealers aren't adequately regulated by the USDA, including when it comes to determining where the animals come from to ensure our pets don't end up in research laboratories. And I think it's very significant. We've got what we regard to be a very strong relationship with the National Institutes of Health, and NIH will no longer fund research involving dogs from random source bee dealers starting in 2015. So the NIH, which is the major funder of research in the country, recognizes there's no future here and also argues this is not necessary for research. And many different institutions have policies that prohibit the acquisition of dogs from these bee dealers, including the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Colorado, Denver, many others, including Emory University, also in Georgia. There's also federal legislation on this issue, and it is a subject that's been debated and discussed, and we hope that this investigation really ends the operations of these bee dealers. And I think we also want to call on Georgia Regents University to stop unnecessary experiments and to raise its level of animal care. And to that point, I'm going to ask my colleague Andrew Rowan to come up. Dr. Andrew Rowan has a very, very long history in the field of animal testing and experiments. He's a published author on the issue, worked at a major veterinary college, and I'll leave it to him to talk a little bit more about the science.
Thank you very much, Wayne. I'm going to be talking in general overview terms. I spent 15 years at Tufts University, where I ran and or chaired several animal care and use committees. These are the bodies that oversee and approve animal protocols at research institutions. And I have been promoting alternatives to animal testing and animal research now for 37 years. And during that time, I'm pleased to say that there has been a 50% decline in the use of animals in research. I hesitate to take credit for all of that 50%, but it's very gratifying to see that there has been this drop in the use of animals. This type of animal use, I hesitate to call it or to characterize it as science, is relatively common in research institutions across the country and across the world. It's carried out to gather data, to fill in forms, to promote products for commercial gain. The use of animals for this type of project has become very much of a habit. If you want to get a product approved, you need to sort of go and sort of say to the FDA or other regulatory body, this is what I plan to do, do you think it's okay? It isn't actually required. That's one of the interesting parts, but it's become part of the habit of commercial product approval. And it is unnecessary. The reason why we must question this is because the animals are suffering. Even though most of the work that was actually sort of involved in the dental extraction, in putting in the implant and in removing it was done either under anesthesia or when the animals were dead, the animals spent 8 weeks in this process. That's a long time to spend with dental surgery. And dental activities, one of the things about dentistry and oral research is that it causes a great deal of distress in the animals in which it is carried out. And so we need to sort of challenge the notion that this is the sort of thing that we need to do. and challenge the notion that this is the future. We do have a statement in the package from a dentist who characterizes the research and gives some detail, some scientific detail, as to why he in particular thinks that this particular research was unnecessary. I'm not going to go into sort of detailing the specifics of that. Suffice to say that I found his arguments very persuasive. We need to move forward from this type of laboratory investigation. We need to move forward in the direction outlined by the current director of NIH, Dr. Francis Collins. Dr. Francis Collins has established the National Center for Translational Sciences, Advancing Translational Sciences, NCATS, and he is on record as saying that the type of animal research that is being carried out now is something that in the future we might be able to do without. We look forward to that. In fact, we look forward to the day in the relatively short-term future where animal testing of the sort that was carried out on these dogs is no longer carried out, that we can do it all with alternative approaches and alternative technologies. The Wyss Institute at Harvard is pioneering humans on a chip technologies, and if you go onto their website, you'll see Vimeo's sort of talking about the end of animal research. This is the future. This is where we are going. As I said, animal use has already declined by 50%. There's been a brief sort of hiatus over the last 10 years as people have become enamored of genetically modified mice. Unfortunately, not with a great deal of positive outcome, but we are soon going to start moving in this new direction of engineered human tissues, of high throughput testing, of computer algorithms that will deliver a humane science and better human health. So this type of thing we want to end, and we want to move towards a new humane productive science. Thank you very much. I would like to introduce my colleague, Vice President for Animal Research Issues, Kathleen Conley.
Thank you so much to everybody for being here today. I come here as somebody who actually worked in an animal research laboratory with primates for a number of years, and unfortunately a lot of what we saw in this laboratory is what I witnessed, where failure to follow federal law and just general lack of resources and appropriate care given to the animals. We saw a number of animals used at GRU. As you've seen, dogs were one of the animals used. And as of November 1st, GRU was carrying out grants that totaled $50 million in federal funding from the National Institutes of Health. But as far as the specific dogs being used, that was a privately funded research protocol. In regards to violation of federal law, GRU must follow the Animal Welfare Act and Public Health Service Policy. And we have filed complaints with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the National Institutes of Health about concerns raised at that facility, including a dog in poor body condition and malnourished being used in surgical protocols. And it appears that the protocol we saw carried out was not approved by the appropriate committee on the GRU campus that is tasked with ensuring the welfare of animals. We also saw that they were cited in 2012 for extreme temperatures in one of their facilities where dogs were held, where the facility got to be over 100 degrees. In terms of the other animals used, including non-human primates, there were 53 non-human primates held at this facility, and only 2 of whom were housed together. So all the animals were housed alone for extended periods of time, the entire time we were in the facility, and they were exhibiting extreme stress and were pulling their hair out and eating it, circling, repetitive motions, and just generally in severe psychological distress from this lack of social companionship. And it showed the lack of training of the employees there when they referred to this kind of spinning as happy dances that the animals were exhibiting. The social housing is a part of the Animal Welfare Act that we take very seriously, and we're calling on the USDA to really crack down on the failure of GRU to provide these animals with social companionship. Also, we saw mice and rats used at the facility. these animals fall under public health service policy requirements. And we saw that the institution failed to provide adequate veterinary care or euthanasia to animals who were suffering, including a mouse whose eye was removed by another mouse during wounding and was left suffering in the cage. There was also significant overcrowding, which is a serious issue at these facilities, and just general lack of adequate staffing. There were 600 cages per room, and caretakers were assigned to multiple rooms, and just we saw filth building up in these cages, including urine and feces. So we're calling on GRU to really get rid of these outdated practices. If you're going to be using in animals in research, you need to be investing in resources appropriately. And we're urging the USDA to use meaningful Animal Welfare Act penalties against this institution, and also calling on NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to look at whether this facility should be funded with taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Andrew Rowan, as well. So, again, we're putting information on our website at humanesociety.org. The video will be available on our website immediately. And I want to underscore again, we consider these experiments with the dogs to be unnecessary and painful. The dogs were obtained through this disreputable process of working with a random source Class B dealer, and we're urging USDA, which has done a very fine job of reducing the number of these Class B dealers, to finish the job now and end the use of these random source Class B dealers. Too risky. Our pets are at risk. And we're also calling upon Georgia Regents University immediately to stop buying dogs from Class B dealers and to end these sorts of dental experiments on dogs. GRU has set a goal to, quote, practice distinction in biomedical research and health science education, end quote. So in order to reach that goal, GRU must end antiquated practices like buying dogs from B dealers, housing primates alone in barren cages, and conducting unnecessary research. Happy to take any questions. Yes.
Of this $65,000 per use for research and testing, is there a number of those that you consider, or all of them, subject to these painful, unnecessary procedures?
Well, it's hard to know. Do you want to come up, Katie, and say a word about that? I mean, part of the problem here is that there are some standards in terms of freedom of information that exist at the federal level if it's an NIH-funded protocol. If it's not funded by the federal government, there may be a state Freedom of Information Act, but even here, we made pretty vigorous efforts to get more information about this, and so much of the information was redacted by the institution. But Katie, why don't you say a word about the broader issue of dogs in experiments?
Can you estimate we think tens of thousands a year are being subject to painful procedures?
Right, so there are exact figures. We know that of the 65,000 dogs, that is the number that are used per year in research. It appears, but the type of use they're largely used for, that they would involve pain or distress. So, we like to make the distinction between the unnecessary experimentation that's happening, like these dental experiments, which are not funded by our federal government, and therefore we don't have a lot of information on exactly what happened in these cases. So we're saying we should be ending the unnecessary research. In life-saving research, we're arguing that we need to be investing in alternatives to move away from using these dogs. The most common uses of dogs, for example, is pharmaceutical testing, but there are alternatives being developed for that practice.
Can't give a range of a number.
How many are subjected to painful experiments?
65,000
Yeah.
or most, or tens of thousands, or all?
Most. We would say most are being used in research that would involve pain and distress.
And of course, the issue of pain and distress is not only for us an issue of the animal having some invasive experiment. I mean, an animal can be distressed if they're in an environment where they're isolated, where they are immobilized. So there's a psychological element to this as well, which the federal government has acknowledged by having a provision dealing with primates specifically, that research labs are supposed to attend to the psychological needs of primates. We don't have a comparable provision for dogs, but we would certainly support that sort of idea at the Humane Society of the U.S.
If it's not illegal for these organizations, labs, and universities to experiment on dogs, but it's illegal for these Class B dealers to be, where do they think they're getting the dogs from?
Well, the Class B dealers are it's a legal classification, but it's been difficult for these random source Class B dealers to meet even the minimal standards that USDA sets for them. They're supposed to provide records, they're supposed to account for some of the ways that they get the animals, and we believe that Mr. Schroeder is under investigation for not making clear where he's getting the dogs from. USDA spends an inordinate amount of time trying to track down what these random source Class B dealer folks are doing, and USDA has more than 10,000 facilities it's supposed to inspect with a finite number of animal care inspectors. So we think this is really a misuse of the finite resources of USDA for no real benefit to society. There's not needed to get dogs for research. I mean, if they're going to use dogs in research, they can have a purpose-bred operation, not have them coming from these random source dealers. Did you want to amplify? Come on.
I'd like to just mention that.
Here, why don't you go behind that?
I'd just like to mention that of the 65,000 dogs, only a few thousand are these random source dogs. The most of them are come from other sources, from Class A dealers, not from the Class B.
Which are the purpose?
Purpose-bred. Yeah, these are purpose-bred. They're purpose-bred for research. There are 2 or 3 facilities in the country that breed them, and mostly provide them to the pharmaceutical companies for sort of product testing of some sort or another. The Class B dealers have typically been used by institutions for surgical training, for this type of study, which is funded by somebody outside, by not through the NIH. As I say, NIH has been discouraging this for a decade or more. Finally, is saying we're going to stop funding this type of work altogether, because these Class B animals are bad research subjects. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what their genetic background is. We don't know what their disease background is. It's like going out and getting some sewer rats and saying, okay, I can use these instead of the genetically defined rats that you get from Charles River or something like that. So it's really a silly thing for science to be doing. The only reason it's being done, it's cheap.
Other questions? Oh,
I was just going to say the National Academy of Sciences report demonstrated or said that they cannot ensure that our pets won't end up in laboratories under the current system.
Our pets.
Right. That pets, there's no assurance that we will not have pets in laboratories.
Yeah, my dog, whom I adopted just a few months ago, she was roaming around rural Virginia. She's part hound, like a lot of those animals, and she was pulled by a rescue group from a public shelter when she was about to be euthanized. So she would be a perfect candidate for a Class B dealer to scoop up somehow. You know, they have sources and they just grab these animals and they direct them to a research lab. So she could have escaped from someone, you know, as a pet, and then landed in the hands of one of these Class B dealers, or she could have, you know, had some other circumstance that led her to be unclaimed. Other questions? Or any operator, if you have any questions of our folks on the phone, we'd be happy to hear them.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to register a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone. There are no audio questions.
Well, great. Well, thank you all very, very much for coming today. And if you have any follow-up, we're happy to stick around for a few minutes, and we will be posting information on the website. Thank you very much.